Hello, welcome to Cowdray's virtual Wellbeing programme. My name is Dr. Louisa McClean. I'm a clinical psychologist at Cowdray, and also I work in the NHS at St George's Hospital. So I'm going to be speaking to you today about keeping mentally well during the lockdown, this third lockdown, and the pandemic in general. So I'm going to be talking for about 15 minutes. I'm going to share some slides with you so that I hope that you have some useful resources at the end. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so getting through it, managing kind of anxiety and low mood during the pandemic. First of all, it's important to say that this is an unprecedented, very difficult time for lots of people globally. And how we manage during this time is kind of different for everybody. So we might all be in the same sea, but we're not all in the same boat. And how we cope and how we manage depends on kind of the sorts of demands and challenges we might already have. Some of you might be worried about job security, being furloughed. You might have young children and be juggling homeschooling and working. You might be caring for elderly parents and be quite concerned about the virus and the effects it might have on their health or on your health. You might be shielding, you might have your own health conditions. So those things are already existing and they really impact on how we cope at the moment. The other thing that makes a difference is our personalities. You know, if you're somebody who finds it hard to fill your time normally by yourself, or a bit of a social butterfly, you know, we have a very busy social calendar, then it's natural that this time is going to be more difficult for you. We have some research available to us now since the first lockdown, which has been done by mental health groups and medical groups. And we do know that existing mental health problems have been exacerbated across all age groups since the pandemic started. And that's probably due to a lack of face-to-face services. And also, I think it reflects that a lot of the informal support services have had to close. So I want to do just a couple of slides on what is anxiety, what actually happens to us when we're anxious. So for this, I want to quickly describe the brain. So we've got three parts to our brain, and the beginning part is the reptilian brain. Now this goes right back to caveman days. If you can think of a golf club, it's kind of like that's your spinal cord and that small part of the brain there. It's a bit like a golf club. Now this is responsible for your flight, fight or freeze response. So if you think about reptile, a snake, if you come across a snake and you've scared it somehow, you've frightened it, it's only really got three options available to it. So it can either bite you, fight, slither away, that's the flight response, or it might pretend to be dead and lie still, and that would be its freeze response. Okay, so then the next part of the brain is like putting a sock on top of the golf club. This is the mammalian brain. This part of the brain has more memory and holds more emotion. If you think about mammals, they give birth to live young, they need to be able to remember where they are, to be able to come back and look after them and feed them. Then we have the human brain. So this is like putting a helmet on top of the golf club and the sock. That goes on top. This is this part of the brain, all of your frontal cortex. This part of the brain is responsible for planning, organising, language, thinking about consequences. It's kind of our rational part of our brain. But when we are anxious, our human brain shuts down. Okay, the reptilian brain comes really into force. This is the bit that kind of takes over, and it leaves us feeling either very emotional, kind of stuck with the mammalian brain stuff and memories, and we get stuck with that, or we go into that kind of emergency flight, fight, freeze mode. And this makes it really difficult to think, plan, and reason. It also, when we go into that mode, it also sends a shot of adrenaline through our bodies, and this creates all sorts of physical symptoms. So you may have noticed that when you're very anxious or quite stressed, it can be hard to think straight, you feel dizzy or lightheaded, your legs can feel like they're turning to jelly, your stomach can feel like kind of butterflies or empty or a bit kind of unsettled, and the heart beats much faster and the breathing becomes more rapid and more shallow. This is all designed to get your body ready for flight or fight response. So the reason that your legs turn to jelly is because there's a rush of blood there. It's getting you ready to run away if needed. The reason the digestive system feels strange is it kind of shuts down, the body shuts it down because it knows it's not a good time to sit down and have a meal. It's not needed right now. The problem is that we can get very attuned to our physical sensations and our physical symptoms when we're anxious and stressed, and then we can start getting worried about them. So it's quite common with older adults, for when their heart is racing, when they're anxious, to think that they might be having a heart attack. It's very common for younger children to report having tummy aches, stomach pains, when actually what they feel is very worried. So just to kind of be aware of that. And the other thing that happens is we can get quite hypervigilant. We go into like meerkat mode. So if you think about the reptilian brain, its sole purpose is to keep you alive. It's about survival. It doesn't care whether you're having a good time. It doesn't care about all the great things that might have happened to you that day. It's on the lookout for danger. And it's programmed, wired to be looking for negatives. So in the context of the pandemic, that hypervigilant came out through a lot of people Googling, researching, talking about, not really being able to talk about anything other than COVID. We were kind of bombarded with information, lots of it well-meaning, but there's that part of our brain is kind of trying to gather all the information, because it thinks that if it's got everything, then it's going to be able to keep us safe. So it's a very natural anxious response, but that kind of information seeking isn't great for lowering your anxiety. But it's not all doom and gloom. So what can we do? The first thing I suggest is always to kind of try to notice what you're feeling and name it. Literally say out loud, I am anxious because. What this does is it links language, it kickstarts that human part of your brain, the helmet part. So you can, it sort of brings it to the forefront. So you can start using your kind of reason and your logic. I am anxious because of. Then you need to kind of accept that currently lots of this situation is just out of our control. And so is the behaviour of others. If you get quite caught up in what other people are or aren't doing, the rules that they might be breaking, it's just going to lead you to be more anxious and really angry. So think about what other things you do have control over. You have control over your own actions, how you spend your time, what you invest your energy into, and what you don't, what you let go of. So reflect on what is working, what isn't. We now have benefit of hindsight. We've been doing this for a year now. What worked for you in the first lockdown? Granted, the first lockdown was I think probably much easier for most of us. Days were longer, weather's better, so we could get outside and see more people. But how can you recreate the things that worked for you the first time round? Now we're on to examining your worries. So there are several ways we do this. We do this quite a lot in therapy. A lot of it is about logging your worries, your thoughts, and really kind of taking them to task. So that you can do this just by writing them down, keeping like a journal, or you can use a worry tree, and I'll come on to that in a minute. They can be quite useful for kind of sorting through worries. You can set yourself a worry time. This is quite common when you set yourself sort of 15 to 20 minutes in the day where you're going to have a worry fest, and you might write it all down. But then the idea of that is you're trying to limit your worries so that you're not worrying all day long throughout the day. Then challenge your worries. Ask yourself how many times you have worried about this before and what the outcome really was. How much do you really believe this thought is true? Just because something pops into our head doesn't make it fact. And what would you say to a good friend who's feeling anxious or low and was worried about this particular thing? That can really help to give us a bit more perspective if we think about what we might say to a friend. Okay, this is the worry tree. So with the worry tree, we sort of notice what you're worrying, perhaps write it down, be really specific. What exactly are you worrying about? Is this worry a current problem, or is it a hypothetical situation? Is there something you can do about it? So if it's a current problem, you can work through if there's any steps you can take. Lots of times when young people are worried about exams, actually, if they sit down and they make a revision timetable, or they spend half an hour doing some revision, they feel a lot less then worried about that. But quite often, if there's something you can't do, if it's a worry about perhaps somebody's health that you don't have control over how that's going, you have to find ways to let go of that worry and to change the focus of your attention. So basically distracting yourself, keeping yourself busy, doing things that soothe you. So that's a worry tree. And there's a reference at the end where you can download that for yourself. What else can we do? So there are lots of strategies that can help to minimize anxiety and to lift mood. So basically keeping perspective. This is really important. Now the end is in sight, okay? This won't last forever. And also thinking about how this is a shared human experience. I mean, children will be learning about this period of time for decades to come. Think about how how you got through that, and you can look back and say that I lived through that time. Have there been any positives? And this is really hard to think about when you think about how big the death toll is currently. But have there been any glimmers of hope through this pandemic? Other things you've learned that you want to hang on to? I think about how there's been a lot less pollution. I've seen lots of random acts of kindness, lots of altruism, and as a member of the NHS, I've never felt so supported by the public as I have in the last year, which has been amazing. Think about how you can kind of grow around the problem. We talk about this a lot at the hospital with people who have a lot of pain or have a severe illness in their life. It can feel like the illness or the pain is taking up all of it, all of your life, all of the space. So instead of trying to focus on shrinking the problem, trying to make everything, life will be much better when I've got less pain, when this has gone away. We have to think about focusing less on the shrinking of that and more of the growing your life around the problem. So trying out new things, learning new things, finding new challenges, working out what soothes you, what works and what doesn't. Another way to do this is to count your blessings. And research suggests that the people who are grateful are basically happier, and that learning to be grateful is something that you can do over time. So keeping a gratitude journal, I would really advocate this, where you basically write down 3 things at the end of the day that you're really grateful for. This might be something as small as a cup of tea that somebody has made you when you've not had time to do it yourself and you really wanted one, to holidays that you're looking forward to, or being grateful to have your health or the house, the roof over your head. So that could be a really nice thing to do at the end of each day. Self-compassion. This is a tricky one. Not many people are actually particularly good at this. So this is about not beating yourself up. I should be doing this better. I should be doing that better. I don't have it anywhere near as bad as everybody else. Blah, blah, blah. Those things are not helpful. Would you say those to a friend who's really struggling? Try to treat yourself the same way you might treat somebody you really loved, you really respected. So think about the things that help you, the things that are going to nourish your soul and look after you. Some of those things might be things like breathing exercises. These are really useful to do when you're feeling. They really minimize the physical symptoms of anxiety if you can get your breathing back into deep and regular pattern. Relaxation exercises. So these come in all sorts of forms. They can be everything from listening to audio, stories, to sort of gentle stretches. So have a look. There's so much on the internet that's useful. And then mindful exercises. Now, mindfulness practice is really about trying to let go of what's been before and what might be coming next, and trying to be really present and focused on this actual moment. So trying to move through life with your focus and your energy on the current sort of task, or even if you're not doing anything, being kind of present with your thoughts and your feelings, and not judging those. So I've included some references right at the end, and some links to useful websites that have got some more information about these things. The other thing that we know is really good for keeping us mentally well, this has been shown through the research in the last year, is keeping a routine, getting up, going to bed at kind of round about the same times, even if you don't, you're not going to work at the moment, or you're homeschooling or something like that. Eating well and trying to limit your alcohol intake. It's really easy to sort of drink too much at the moment. We're all indoors. On that note, get outside. Try to get outside every day. And there's a reason why we're allowed that 1 hour exercise. It's so important for our well-being. So take that hour every day. Get outside preferably. But, do a long walk, do some running, do something that's going to get your body moving. It's going to use a different part of your brain. Also, what the research has told us, that the single most helpful thing that people did for themselves after the first, when the pandemic first broke, was to limit their news intake and to really think about how much social media involvement they had. So think about, do I need to read everything that everybody sends me? Am I reading from reputable sites, or am I getting sucked into kind of a lot of hype and things that are making me feel quite quite stressed out. So think about whether you just watch the news once in the morning and once in the evening, or how you're going to manage that, whether that is helpful to you or not. Make an effort to stay in touch with people, but also manage this so it's not overwhelming. It's probably not helpful to be sitting in front of a computer doing your work all day and then Zooming in the evening as well, sort of back to back. So think about how you manage that, but also stay in touch with people. And think about how you do kind things for others. Time and time again, the research tells us that kindness leads to happiness. And there's a really lovely website called www.actionforhappiness.org. They have some really great ideas for things you can do every day for other people. We know this has a huge effect on our own well-being. You can still do kind things from isolation. You can still write letters, keep in touch with people, make a telephone call to somebody you've been thinking about, recommend books, Netflix series, things that are going to keep other people motivated and busy as well. And then I'm just coming to the end here. So this is the last reference. The last slide is on references and useful links. The two links in the middle there are articles on what we know has been helpful since isolation, and some resources, free resources you can use. There's also loads of apps out there for breathing and for relaxation. So thank you for listening. I hope that some of it's been helpful today. I wish you all the best and stay safe.